to do that every once in a while. Okay, great.
Yes,
thanks.
So we're good. We're recording now, and I'll share my screen, and we can get in. So hopefully you guys all have access to your Zone4 accounts, so you can follow along. If not, we'll still be able to go through this, and at least you'll have the recording to see where you went wrong. A lot of this information is also available on our website, but it's nice to have it all presented to you in a way that you can see what you need to do and what you need to understand. So I'm going to start on the home page here. And when we're creating a registration form, there's a couple different ways that we can go about doing that. Sorry. First, right up at the top here, there's a button that says set up a registration form. For most of you, that's going to be pretty obvious and easy to see. If you're an administrator, though, who has multiple club permissions, or if you depending how your permissions are set up, you might actually want to go into your actual organization home and do it from there. I'm going to show you I'm going to show you how to do it in both ways, just because there are two different code paths here, and the different code paths give you slightly different options, but it's basically the same thing, so it's not too hard. So I'm just going to start on this one right now, and so to click set up a registration form, and we're going to get to see this screen. Right at the top, I'm going to start with this big blue banner. One of the features that we've added recently, or we've made more accessible recently, is the ability to copy old forms. And these don't just have to be forms from your club. They can be forms that other clubs have shared. So as an example, if you have a club or if you're part of a race series where multiple clubs are hosting similar events, and you want to make sure that the same information is captured by every single registration form, despite the fact that it's different clubs using it, you can copy someone else's club or another club's form that they've shared with you. And that just keeps everything the same. So copying a form makes this whole process quite a bit simpler than trying to go through every single step that we're going to go through today. So you can basically set up one form and then just keep copying that and editing it slightly as needed. So the first, there's a link here that says copy a template shared by another organization. So you can click on that, and that'll take you to a list of all the different ones that have been shared. So you can then see this is every single club who shared a form. This is a list of all of them. You can search for them in the template up here, which will then narrow it down a little bit. And then just by clicking copy this form, that'll then generate a new form based on whatever form you're selecting. For this, I'm not actually going to copy a form, so I'm just going to get out of it. And jump back into here. So the first couple form elements are pretty straightforward. You'll need a form title. Usually, if your club is set up with a sport already, it'll default to whatever sport that is. So if most of your clubs will be set up as cross-country clubs, so you won't have to pick. But if you were doing something that wasn't cross-country, if you're doing biathlon, or if you're doing, in a summer event or running race or something, you could pick the sport here. This sport thing really just it changes the icon on the registration form. It doesn't really do anything else for a registration form. Organization name, it should be filled in for you already. Open and close time, which this is the dates that you want your form to be open to the public and when you want it to be closed to the public. You can edit this later, so it doesn't have to be set first thing, but usually we have a good idea of when we want it to be opened and when we want it to close. The key thing is to remember that the time of day is important here. So if you want it to close, by default, it's always open and close at midnight. Sometimes this causes some people problems because they set it a day early or a day late. But just when you're filling in these numbers, we do use a 24-hour clock. So key thing, if you wanted to close it just before midnight or open just before midnight, you'd use 23:59. And so that would then be at the very end of the day, tomorrow night was when this one would open. Same thing with close time. And down here, you also have the other option to select another way to copy. These ones, though, tend to be the ones that are specific for your organizations. So if you are copying someone else's form that isn't part of an organization you're the admin for, it's easier to use the link that's up on the top here. But you can use this one as well. Do you have a question, Alan? So I'm actually going to exit this and hop into an organization just so I can do the next part.
I think you were muted when you asked your question.
It could be simple question. Can we
Yep.
do away with the thumbnails of people and have a bigger screen image of what you're teaching?
I think that might be something on your end.
If you say so.
Al, if you go into the 3 buttons on the bottom and change the layout, so there's beside the hang up the call, there's 3 buttons. If you click on there, there's a change layout, full screen, that you should be able to rearrange what your screen looks like.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so hopping back in here, I'm going to start building this form that we're going to go through today from my organization home. This is my private testing club where I do a lot of the testing that I do for Zone4. You can get to it if you don't know how to get to your organization home. Start from zone4.ca/manage. When you log in, at the top here, you should see a list of all the clubs and everything that you have admin access to. So I'm just going to hop into my testing club, and then I'm going to click set up a form. And there's a question about come back to that. So one key difference here, what you can see on my screen, everything looks the same, but you'll see at this bottom here, it says start from scratch. If you are building something that you're not trying to copy anything, if you just want to build something either just to see how it works or you have nothing to actually copy, you can always use start from scratch, and this will just build a completely new form registration without any previous things being imported. So that's what I'm going to do today. If you prefer, you don't have to do this. You can always copy a form that you already have. But for the purpose of showing you how all the steps go through, I am going to copy, or I'm going to start from scratch and not copy one. If you do copy one, though, it's very easy to come in and delete and change anything, and I will go through that later. So for now, we're going to say X. Real cross-country skiing. Say today, and we'll close this. One key thing to remember when you're setting the open and close times of your account is that you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time before building it that you so that we can approve it and that you can go through the process. If you're trying like the night before you want it to open to build your registration, that's not going to be enough time for you to go through it all, for us to review it, and then for us to say, okay, so it's a good idea to start building these forms significantly earlier so that you have time to go through it, and any problems that come up we can then address.
Elijah?
Yes.
Stephanie, we have a couple of participants that don't appear to have the option to start from scratch, only to copy a form. Could that be caused by the level of administrator access?
I don't think that's an admin thing. I think it depends kind of on the code path. So if you started from this page here, from zone4.ca /manage, you won't see that option to start from scratch. You actually have to go and find your organization home and go to that one. So you should actually see at the top, like it should say zone4.ca /manage/club, and then a whole string of codes. That's the identifier for your club. Otherwise,
okay, do you want to give everyone a chance to try to get to that spot? Oh,
for sure.
Okay, one person's confirmed that they're in. Okay, everyone's in. Perfect.
Okay. It's not really, it won't create a different race file if you go one way or the other. The key thing is that, like, just because it's slightly different code paths, and if you want to create one from scratch, you have to go through it this way. But they will create the same style of form. So there's no, unless I would only go this way unless you're actually creating from scratch. Then you have to go this way. But if you're not creating one from scratch, you can just do it from your homepage, and that should be fine.
Elijah, we still have one participant that is not able to get to the place from scratch, so we might have to go through that again.
Right. Yeah. So just I'm just going to create this form so I don't have to
start over.
When you are at zone4.ca, when you first log in, at the top you should see a list of organizations. If you don't see a list of organizations, it means you're not a super admin, or sorry, you're not an admin person. You shouldn't see the super admin. But if you don't go to that organization home, you won't see the code path here to set up a form. And if you don't use this set up a form one, you won't be able to see the start from scratch. I think if you can't see the start from scratch at this point, you might not, there might be something either with your organization or with your permissions that is stopping you. It doesn't necessarily matter. You can pick to copy one and then follow along. The main thing is I want to be able to show, I'm doing this from scratch so I can show you how to do one from scratch and how the whole form is built step by step. It's very likely that when you're actually building a registration form, you will just copy another form that's already been made. Most of your clubs should be, I think, have an established history with Zone4. And if you are doing something new, you can always copy someone else's form. So I think, like, if you can't actually get to the scratch thing, create from scratch, I don't think it's going to be holding you back too much, because you always have the ability to copy a form that is then, it can be your template to start with. But for now, I think I'm just going to keep moving on. Yeah, for whatever. If you see something, if there's an option to copy it, then pick whatever one. I'm not sure whatever ones you'd have, but it really shouldn't matter for this tutorial. The idea is more to get inside, and once we've copied one, then you're in. But yeah, if you're not in, essentially, to follow along, we'd like you to be in a race file, or sorry, in a registration form, like I'm presenting.
Are we encouraging people to not use the legacy system today? The legacy system isn't supported by Zone4 anymore, so you're kind of on your own if you get stuck in there. That's an accurate statement, Elijah? That's what
Yes, that's an accurate statement. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the legacy system is, very few of our staff members have it. But yeah, in the drop-down box menu, you might see some that say legacy forms, and I think you should be okay to copy those into this one. All right, so I'm going to let everyone catch up. to be here. So you should be looking at a form, something like this. If you're not in here, I'll just give everyone a bit of time to get to it, and then we'll move on.
Elijah, do you see you have Tiffany with a hand up?
I did. Do you have a question, Tiffany?
No, sorry, that was me trying to give you the thumbs up.
I thought that's because you changed it. So anyways. All right, anyone need more time? We're good to continue? Okay. So this is kind of the overview page. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because this is like a good way of like seeing the different elements of a form. You can always go back to this form once you've moved onto it, or sorry, back to this page once you've moved on. The first step is to edit the form, which we'll get to in a second. Next, we have 2, which is number settings. There's a whole bunch of different options in the settings that determine how the registration is going to be used, and different ways to adjust it. Publish, posting it to Zone4, making sure it's live. You can also create reports, and then finally the live registration, which we'll get to. So yeah, edit form. There's in a Zone4 registration form, there's 2 types of elements. There are group elements and there are individual elements. So group elements are also referred to as cart level elements, and basically what I'm trying to talk, or what we're mean when we say group or cart elements, is that it's possible for someone to come in and on the same transaction register multiple people. So you can set up your registration form so that if you want, if you have like, if someone, doesn't matter how many people they register, you can select an option or 2 that affects everyone in that grouping, and then that saves you time from having to fill out the same information for everybody. So an example is if you're having like a team register, rather than making the coach or whoever's registering this team fill out the team name for every single individual, you could set up a group element where they put in the club as a group element, and then when they go to the individual level, they will then be able to add the name and all the other information for each individual person they are registering, but it'll keep that same group element for the entire team. You do not have to use group elements though, so it's very it's something you can just skip over if it's something that's you don't care about, or it feels too complicated. Don't worry about it. But there is the option of using group elements to capture the same information at the cart level as opposed to the individual level. So when we're adding, the first thing that we want to do is to start adding elements. That's how we're going to like build this form. So by clicking add an element, we'll see this screen that comes up. And this gives us then a list of, first of all, preset elements that we've built in Zone4. These are things that are very common, and almost every registration would need it, or they're very specific ones that you wouldn't want to replicate yourself. So of course, like the first ones are very obvious. First name, last name. So I'm just going to start adding these. First name, last name. I'm going to make this one required for all registrants. And the downside to this, and why it's good to copy the form, is that I have to add every single one of these elements one by one in order to fill out the form. So by copying the form, you can skip a lot of this, and you might even want to create like a template for your club if you don't have one already. That's maybe just a few basic stuff, so that it saves you some time as opposed to having to go through every single one of these and add them all. That's interesting. So some of these elements, if you can see as I'm selecting them, up here we have things that are required and optional. So there's 3 different options. By default, anything's optional because we don't know what you require. Usually some things like, obviously name, first name, last name, we do make required, because if those aren't required, it's hard to tell who exactly is registering. But a lot of things you can make optional depending on what the things, like you might want to collect information from some people that, if they want it out there, they can fill it in, but you don't want to have to force them to fill it in. So right now I'm making them required for all registrants, which just means that you have to fill them in, because if you don't fill them in, you won't be able to actually complete the form and complete the transaction. There's also another option to say require for online registrants. Basically what this means is that if someone is registering themselves, they have to do it. But if an admin comes in, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, if an admin comes in and adds a person, they don't have to fill in these things. So if an admin can add anyone, we do keep track of registrants that aren't complete, that we're missing information for. And the required for online registrants means that versus required for all registrants essentially helps us see who's complete and who's not complete. So if it's something that we definitely want everyone to put in, or we want people to add it, but if on the end we don't really care, that's kind of the distinction there between required for online and required for all registrants. Either way, we still want the information. But if it's required for online registrants, it means the admin can add someone and not fill it in, and it won't be flagged at all. Specific for cross-country skiing, we have a number of form elements here. For instance, race license, and fees for single-member day license, and the new Tier 3 license. These are very specific to like some events. Some events you don't, if you're not operating under Nordic Canada's banner, you don't necessarily need these fields. I can talk a little bit more about that if you guys need me to. But basically they're built in so that you can select them and then and add them to the form, and then they're there. You don't have to worry about it. They're pre-built and will be collected if needed. Yes, we are working on that to help help fill things in. Okay, so that's all the preset stuff. I think that's pretty straightforward. Now we're going to talk about custom elements here. So fee types, data field types, and display elements. So this is kind of how you would then customize your form depending on what your actual event is. I'm actually going to start talking about display elements first, just because display elements are kind of like things that you can add. They're optional, but it helps you kind of create your more specific form. So as an example, like you might throw on an image display element, and the image could be the banner for the event, and or some other image that's relevant to your event, your club logo or something, and you might want to have that at like the top of your page. Clicking on this will allow you to then to upload any images that you might have. There's also text blocks, section headings, separators, all things that are pretty straightforward, but that allow you to fill in some things, any information that you want to display on your registration form. Data fields, pretty straightforward. Anything that if you want to collect, like a text field, number field, option field, there's a whole bunch of different options that you can customize depending on your needs of your event. And then fee types are actually things that people would pay money on. And the same types, there's a couple different ones: fixed fees, quantity fees, option fees, user set fees. All these ones depending on, you would pick depending on your event. So just as an example, I'm going to build in some option fees here, because normally what we do for a lot of races is the option fees are what end up being the categories in our race. They don't necessarily have to be. You could build it so that you have a single flat fee for your race, and then below that, a couple different options. But for this example, I'm just going to build some in here. So we'll say Saturday race. Because this is a fee, I can now add a cost to any of these fees. Depending on your event, you might have different costs. If you wanted to have a different cost for any of these, it's very easy to throw in. Okay, where are we? So any of these fees that we can create, or not any of these fees, any of these options, we can also make conditional. So depending on what we actually want and how we want to build this form, we might instead, like I built this one way where I said, hey, this is the option, it's required, you have to fill this in. But I might not actually want to do it. I might want to know if they're racing at all first. So I can actually, in this case, I'm actually going to add another element, custom element. We're going to say a checkbox field. We're going to say Sunday race. And actually, I messed up, sorry. I wanted to add this as a fixed fee. So if I just wanted like a flat fee for a race, I could put in like this. And save this one. But then I can go add a form element, add a custom element, option fields again. And now here we're actually going to do Sunday race category. And so same thing as with the other one, I'm going to build in what I want the race categories to be. So open men, open women, junior men, junior women. And now that I've created this one, I'm actually going to go down here and almost to the very bottom, there's this heading called visibility. And we have a whole bunch of options in here. Well, there's 4. You can just say that only displayed, it's always displayed is the default. We can limit it to admin, so that's people who we can see it on the inside. Anyone who's an admin in the form can see it, can fill it in if necessary. No one else can. Only display in kiosk mode. This is if you're specifically setting up a kiosk so people can register, you might want to collect different information, so you can set up an option to only display there. And the final one that I'm going to talk about right now is controlled by other form fields. So in this case, I'm going to turn this one on. I'm going to only display when and find a previous one, which in this case is the Sunday race. And then set a condition is checked. And then I can save this. So now the way that this is built up is when someone's actually in in the field, when they're registering for the race, they won't see these race categories appear unless they've already checked the Sunday race as an option. So this can help you, because this can do two things. One, it can like compress the form so it's not this huge long scrolling document that everyone has to like go through all these different options. It can also direct you to different paths. So a recent example that I had was that sometimes you might be registering coaches and athletes using the same form. And if you're registering someone as a coach, you might, you don't care about all their information. You just need to know that they're a coach, what club they're being, and where they're, and whether or not they're showing up. So you only have those three options appearing at first, but then you make the rest of the form contingent on whether or not they're an athlete. So I could go in and edit all these forms contingent on whether or not the first option or the second option of the form is checked off or not. And that then allows you just to, keep a tighter thing and not waste a lot of space and time with people trying to fill in the whole form when you actually don't care if they do. Visibility. The other thing that's we can do with forms is we can create a form, or we can create an element that only appears during certain times. So this is like if something changes in the form or something changes in your registration where you only want people to access a certain option after a certain date, but you want them to be apt to fill in stuff beforehand or something, you can put these time limits on, much the same way that you would put in the limits on when the form is actually open or closed. And this would then limit the option. It would only appear during the set dates. And so you can actually go in and select, the 22nd, to the 30th, if there was some information that you only wanted to capture for people who registered within that gap. Outside that time window, people won't even see this form. It won't appear to everyone. One thing I just wanted to point out to note about gender. We've had this problem a few times. Right now, you can see by default, the gender field displays female, male, and other. Some people don't like that. And so there is the option. It doesn't appear when you're looking at it on the admin side. There is this show an unspecified gender option, which will allow those three options to actually appear on the form. If it's unchecked, you only see male and female. If it is checked, you should see all three, or when it is checked, you should see all three options. One thing that I wanted to note, and why I'm bringing this up, some people have been going in and they've been creating a custom form element and calling it gender. The problem with doing this is that if you actually do this and collect this information and then expect gender to be part of a race file, where you pull in this and you use this gender field to actually create to divide people for your start list or for your results, it won't actually work. It won't import people as male, female. It'll assign a 7-digit number to either of those two fields, and so you won't be able to use it in a race. So the key takeaway there is that if you want to use gender in a race, you have to use the preset one. You cannot create a custom one and call it gender. Right now, that's broken. So please don't do that.
Elijah, this is Stephanie. I have a question.
Yes.
When you're pulling into the race file,
Yes.
If you do male, female, other,
Yep.
they're still going to pick their category, and we're not offering, unless we're offering a non-binary category, they're either going to register as a U14 boy or a U14 girl. Does that solve the problem for the race import or not?
Yeah, so like if you have a preset like male, female, like these options that I've created here, I don't care about their gender that's selected in this case if I've done this. But I might create, if you created the registration form, the way a lot of LOPITs create their forms, where they don't actually have these race categories. What they do is they collect your birth date, your age, your gender, and your distance, and then based on those, they then split out different categories. So in that case, you wouldn't be able to use gender to then split out male, female if you used a custom field for gender. So that's why I'm saying please use the default, because otherwise that won't work. But if you are using preset categories where everyone, like most cross-country Ontario races, I would assume, do this, because that's fairly common for any sort of sanctioned race. But for something like, every year at the Berkey, they don't collect these specific categories. They just collect the distance, age, and gender, and then from that they'll break down the results depending on what they need. And so in that case, they would have to use the preset gender field.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? I guess this is a good time to just catch up on building the form. Kyle, yes. So instead of putting junior men, junior women, if you are using the preset gender, you can just say gender, or sorry, you can just say junior, youth, whatever your age categories, and then use the gender field to assign that part. The reason I specifically hold these all out is just from when you're actually doing the race, it's a lot easier just to have one field that's your category. So you don't have to be like, when you're creating your start list, you don't have to split it by 2 different field options. And I'll talk about this more on Wednesday. By having these preset categories, it makes the race organization a lot easier, but you don't have to do that. You can just say, put in an age field or a category field that isn't divided by gender or isn't divided by age, and then move on that way.
I have a question.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you put in the birth date, can it automatically put you into the right U14, U whatever, like jump you that way too?
Yeah, so there's 2, I should have gone over this a little bit, but yeah. So there's 2 different options that we have. There's birth date and there's age. And so, yeah, so if you put in either of these 2 fields, we can do that. Age is like pretty, obviously how that works. There's a step when creating a race file, and I'll go over this a little more during our next session, that we actually have to calculate age. So if you don't want to go through the step of calculating the age, you can just ask them their age here. So ask them their age. And by asking their age, then by filling that in, then you can use that to create things. So another example would be, as I was talking about with the Berkey, just I could say distance, age, gender, and then use that in the race file. Yes, Stephanie. Sorry, Stephanie, you go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. If you're hosting a sanctioned race and you're using the categories that we have, it is important to be able to allow people to race up, because some people will race up in their category. So it is important to collect the birth date and not force them into a category. For a Loppet or a Berkey, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. A lot of it depends on the type of event you're hosting and like what the actual hosting policies are. If you're a sanctioned event, if you're not a sanctioned event, if you're doing just like a fun club event, what you need to collect is a lot different than if you're hosting, a FIS sanctioned Canada Cup or something. All right, so everyone feels comfortable with that. Yeah, so Kyle's asking if you can create 2 different sets of results here. Yeah, you can create as many results sets as you want. The more information you collect, when you get to the race, the more options you have. So it's always, in my mind, it's always good to collect as much information, as much detailed information as you can or as you want. Because it's hard, if you don't have their information on the registration form, you can't do anything with it later. So anything that you think might affect your race, or anything that you want to have in the race file, it's always a good idea to make sure that's on the registration form, because that's a really good way of collecting that information rather than having later to go through and try and find this information and then input it manually into a race file.
Okay, just to elaborate.
Yep.
So last year the problem we had was that it was the first time I have done any kind of results with this new system. I was kind of an expert on the old Zone4,
Right.
but anyways, we collected. So the previous person did a form which had about 1 million categories in it, but it actually prevented me from generating results based on different categories for a different sort of point system, if you will. But I think if I ask less questions by just doing gender and age, then I can create categories later, or 2 sets of categories and 2 sets of results, and generate results. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Because again, like, it depends on how everything in your specific event is working. But yes, if that is the case, and we'll see that a lot, especially not so much with, again, as Stephanie said, with, like, sanctioned races. But if you're not a sanctioned race and you do need, like, different information, or Cross Country BC does this really annoying thing where they produce results based on categories, but then they also produce it by year of birth, and so you always end up splitting up again. And so if they don't collect the year of birth on this form, they can't do that. But if they do, then they have the freedom to do whatever they want.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone need me to go over anything else again? I was worried it was going to go a little too fast when I was creating this form. Yep, nothing else. Moving on. Okay, so I'm going to hop in now to settings. So the settings field is a little hard to find because it doesn't actually appear up in this banner here. But if you click on menu and then settings, this is where the options that kind of dictate how the form works. So there's a whole bunch of different things here. Some are very, like, self-explanatory, like edit contact info. Depending on how you're building the form, you can set phone numbers, websites, email addresses here. The registration dates, again, this is how you would then edit the registration form and what dates it's open. So you can see at the top here, the main form open dates are up here. So these would be the dates of the open, closing, and when you can actually use the form, and just make sure that it's working. And then any other ones here would be specific dates that, or specific fields. You can edit everything essentially here. Limits. Sometimes we want to limit the amount of people that can register, either the amount of people who want to register for the entire event. So you can put in, like, the total up at the top, the maximum total registrants. So if your event only has 100 spots, you can then put in a limit of 100, and then only 100 people will be allowed to register in your event. If anyone else over that limit tries to sign in or tries to sign up, they won't be able to. Also, if there's, like, any specific fields here, like if the Sunday race, you only have enough people, enough supplies to do 50 on Sunday, you can then limit that option to 50 people. So editing contact, that would be for it's specific for this event, for this registration form. So it wouldn't be for the whole organization going forward. It would just be specifically for this event, who should contact, or the contact information for whoever's running this specific event. So most of the time it could be like the club, but sometimes you might have different people doing different things. But everything we're doing now affects this specific registration form, not the whole organization. Yep.
Hi, sorry, can I comment on this? In that contact information, that will be the contact information, Elijah, correct me if I'm wrong, that shows up on your registration form. However, if when they get the receipt, they reply to, it goes to the contact information that's set up for your organization. We discovered that at Ski Nationals last year. It wasn't going, like, if someone replies in there, it doesn't go. So sometimes you just have to keep an eye on that. I know
Yeah,
that's quite detailed, but for anybody at that level of detail, it's
Yeah,
important.
so there is, no, that's a good point. And it's something that I probably would have not thought to mention. There is the option, I don't know if this is, we've been having some problems with receipts. I think this is all right, this works, but I haven't tested it recently. You can, under the receipt settings, send a copy of the receipt to an email that you specify and a receipt reply to. But yeah, that is something to be aware of, as Stephanie says, where people reply to and what actually happens with those emails. But yeah, important sometimes. All right, so limits, I think limits are pretty straightforward. Fees and payments. This is just an overview of all the fees that you decide to collect on your form. The one interesting thing here that you can do here is you can set up either early bird or late pricing. So if you see this button here right below all these lists, you can actually go in and you can say, set a date, one or two dates that will then determine price changes for all the forms. You can set them specifically for each form. You can turn it on and off, but you need to set them up here in order for them to take effect. This would be the first place that you would go. So then you can set, I said the registration is going to open on the 20th. So I'm going to say, well, if you register before December, so until the 30th of November at midnight, you'll get one price. And then I can say the second price if you register late, like if you wait until the last week. It's not the last week, but if you wait until the last week, you have to pay extra. So I can set up these two dates. I can click save. And then now either here, I can either go into the form and element this one too. But I can then say like, okay, for this one, I said it was 45. That's like the base price, but I can say, it's 25 if you register early, and it's 90 if you register to wait till the last minute. So sometimes there is a glitch with the actual dates. I've seen that a couple times. I'm not sure if that's fixed, Kurt. I thought it was, but sometimes there has been a few issues with time zones and when the form actually makes that change. So it is something to be a little bit aware of. You can always come in once the form's live and make some of these changes. So sometimes I know we told people, because I didn't put prices on Saturdays, on Sunday races. So yeah, for sometimes what we have is said people, if there is the change that they can actually come in and edit the form when they want that change to take place, so that they can actually control specifically when it happens, if that makes sense. And yes, to answer Kyle's question, because I didn't put prices on the Sunday categories, they're not actually listed here. The price for the Sunday race, the way I set up the form is that the Sunday race had a price attached to it, but the options didn't have prices. So this will only show you fields that have actual prices attached to them, or that are fee fields. Anything that's not a fee field won't appear here. And then if you scroll down a bit, payment methods, by default, of course, credit card payments, that's how most of the processing happens. You can also set up your form to allow for cash or check payments. So this essentially limits our ability to track whether or not someone has paid, because you actually have to come into the form and mark them as paid. But it does mean that if you want to accept cash payments, or if you want people to pay by check, you can turn this option on, and Zone4 will not demand a payment. And when they go through the form, there'll be an option to say pay by check. And then finally, the refund policy here at the bottom. You can decide based on your organization's policies if you offer refunds, if you don't, or write your own one. Karen, yes. So the day license and tier 3 license fees are fixed amounts. I believe that you can decide whether or not you eat those costs. But that's more of a question for either for Stephanie or for Nordic Canada.
I think it gets added automatically like the day license fees, but that is a good question, and we will be talking about it at the community update. But I believe if you put the registration fee as 50 and you identify it as a tier 3 race, it becomes 53.
Yeah, that's set up and how it should work. I do believe though that you can change. This is it's a new build for us, so I'm a little hesitant. But I believe you can edit the how much the cost is in the form, but that means that then you would then be responsible for paying it then forward either to Nordic Canada on your own.
Which requires another form and is complicated.
Yeah. So
Nordic Canada tried to build it so it would be really easy and straightforward, but you have to pass it off to the participant if you want it to be easy and straightforward.
And Todd, yes, if cash is, cash and check, we essentially mean anything. E-transfers are essentially cash. It's just, if you're not paying by credit card through Zone4 and through our remittance program, then you would have to select pay by cash check and give them the option to pay you by a way that we wouldn't record. And then in that case, we wouldn't have anything to do with any of the money if you select cash or check. I think we maybe want to stay clear of that for now, but we'll see. You can, for sure, if you want to. Okay, taxes. This is another thing that, if you want to pay tax and you want your customer or your registrants to pay the tax, you have to turn on the tax setting here. By default, it's turned off and no one's charged tax, but then of course you're responsible for then paying whatever taxes may apply to yourself. But if you want to charge them tax, you turn it on, you enter whatever tax rate you have, and now taxes will be applied to the registration costs on your form. So discount codes. Sometimes you might want to offer discount codes so that whoever's registering for your form don't pay the full price. If you didn't see that, sorry, that was under registration settings, there was a more options and then discount codes. By turning that on, that then allows you to create a discount codes. By clicking on this, you will automatically generate a code for you. There's 3 different types of discount code types. Either a percentage discount, where we'll deduct that amount as a percentage, a fixed amount, or a discount fixed amount. So you can pick whatever you need and then fill in whatever. So if you wanted to say, a 10% discount, you can limit the quantity. You can write a description to remind you what it is. And then you can choose which fee elements it applies to. So if you apply to if you apply to all fees, that means they can enter the discount code and it'll apply to whatever fee you have, or you can specifically say only for Sunday. And you can create as many codes, these codes as you want. We do generate the code here, but you can eraser, you can type in your own thing. Whatever you want the code to be, you can customize it. It's a good question about taxes. I don't know if that is. Sorry, where's fees? When you go into the actual field, and if you, so now that I've set the taxes, I skipped over this part and I'm sorry. So once I've set the tax field here, turn taxes on, I can then go back to the form and edit any of these things and say, edit this element and then charge tax on this fee. And if you don't click charge tax on this fee, it won't actually charge the tax for this fee. So you have to make sure that you, so a lot of these options, whether it's discount codes or taxes, you have to make sure, or setting the before and after dates. Sometimes you'll have to apply them, set them up in settings, and then go to the form and actually choose what fields they apply to. So in this case, even though I set the tax form originally, I would then have to go into the field and tell the field to charge tax.
Can I
Yeah.
add to that? Yeah. So, however, if you go into your category setting, you have to apply it to your whole. You can't apply it to only like open men or junior men. There's no way to do that. So if you don't want to charge tax to a certain category, you're going to have to set it up as a different field. That being said, every club can decide what they want to do, but we do have advice from an accountant, the accountant, that if you have an HST number, the taxes need to be charged to everybody unless the race is primarily for U14. So, and we've run into that with programming as well. So for example, if you're running a development program and it's a U14 only, then you could not charge the tax. But if there's masters in that same program, if it's not just destined for U14, you have to charge tax to everybody. That's the advice we have from the accountant. I would invite you to go speak to your own accountants if you have one. I know that's getting out of the elements, Elijah, for you, but in Ontario, that's how it's set up.
It's good to know. And also, like, I can then say like stuff like, if that is your case, you might set up your fees differently than how I've structured it here. And so you might have the fee options not be tied directly to the category, but you can set up your fee structure a little differently so that depending on whether or not you need to tax them, they would be different options. And you could have a separate checkbox depending on what option they would have. And using conditional elements and like how you display it, you could build it so that they tell you the information that determines whether or not you charge tax on them, and then an option appears that they would then have to select, or that you could by default would be already selected. Just as an example, I guess I'll show this. I could say create a custom. Sorry, how am I doing this? Option field. That's just race info, and you could say, how do I want to do this? Sorry, I'm thinking on as I do this. Oh no, I did this backwards. So you could build your race categories, and you could add a form element. A custom, a fixed fee, and youth cost, and that could be $25. And then I would not charge tax on that, but then I would make it controlled by other form options when race category is set to youth. And so now when you're in the form, you'd only see this youth cost pop up when you've selected the youth option. And you could do that for all three of these things. And then on that case, you could, in each one of these check marks, you could say whether or not there's to charge taxes on them. Any questions on that? Cool. Settings. I guess I'm usually the chief of timing, so, or not the chief of timing, but I'm the person who has to deal with that. So, advanced settings. There's a couple things in here that are important. If you, by default, if the registration is closed, we just have a thing that says this registration is closed. If you want to say something different, like if it's temporarily closed, or if you say thanks for checking in, this form will open tomorrow. Or I mean, you wouldn't say tomorrow because that's always going to happen. But you could have something like that, a custom message, so that when people do come and they do select and you're not actually open, you can either tell them that it's going to open soon, or that check back next year, or something like that. Age calculation dates is the next option here. So when I talked about a little bit earlier about calculating the ages, you can always it depends on when, depending on your event and depending on like how everything is structured, you actually like, you can pick when you actually want to calculate their ages. So if you're setting up your form to only be available to people who have a certain age and based on their calculated age, you can pick that date. By default, the ages are calculated as December 31st in the year that the registration closes. So in this case, it's closing in January. So the age base will be calculated based on December 31st, 2024. But you can change that if you need to, depending on calculating ages. The next one, share with other clubs as templates. So this is how people share their templates or their registration forms with other people. But turning on this option, that means that anyone now can copy this form, which I'm actually not going to turn on because this is a really messy form. But if I wanted to, I could then share this one. I could make it nice and then click, share with other clubs as a template, and then everyone could just copy it directly from their starting place. And then below, just more options for limits and discounts that we've already talked about. But you can find that here under advanced settings as well. You can also copy directly from this form. So there's the option to just copy from this form from here. If you were in this form and you thought it looked pretty good and you wanted to, set up a second form as you're building it, there's the option at the bottom here to copy the form as you're doing it. So then you can build a series of forms at the same time. And then publish and share this form would be the next. Does anyone have any questions about the settings before I jump into publish? Cool. Okay, so publish. Publishing is pretty straightforward. The first step in publishing a form is you have to request a review on it. Basically, that means that you hit the button and we get an email saying, "Hey, this registration form, we think it's ready to go. Can you approve it?" And then someone, it's usually either Cindy or Marion, will go through and they'll look for any like glaring mistakes or problems with the form. For instance, if it's something that we know that you're going to charge fees for, but you didn't actually put a fee in, then we might be like, this doesn't make sense. And so we'll flag it to you. It does take us some time. This isn't like an automated process. It actually involves one of our employees looking at it. And then also sometimes trying to get in your head and figure out what you need. So it's also, we always ask that you make sure you hit this request review once you're satisfied with it, but with enough time for us to actually do the review. Sometimes people, request review the night before, and even if Marion decides to work until 8 o'clock, there's no way that she gets to it because you submitted it at 9. Luckily, you guys have a little more time because you're on the East Coast, or well, not East Coast, but you're in Eastern Canada, so you have another 2 hours. But yeah, just please give us more time because it does take us. I know there's sometimes there's some options, or not options. Sometimes we want to make it easier for you, but you can help us do that by giving us some more time. Registration dates here. Again, you can edit that. The link to the form. You might not. Yeah, you can decide whether or not you publish the form, and once the form's are closed, you can then decide whether or not you can limit people who actually have access to it. So there is a public link here to this form. This one is specific to this form. You can then copy this and distribute it to people once it's open, but if you don't want it to be public, just to if you want to control who can actually get in. So if you did have an early bird registration period where you wanted your club to get the first crack at it, you could first turn off this form on Zone4, and then take this link and then send it out as an email to your club. So what that would do is that even though your club is live, the registration is open, people won't be able to find it because it's not listed on Zone4. But anyone with the link would then be able to access the form, and they would get the first crack at signing up. The last thing on this page we're going to talk about is creating an event page. So this one has more to do with races, but an event page is something that Zone4 does that basically it's a landing page for your event. So usually we link your registration to it once we've created. Yeah, sorry, Stephanie.
All right, Elijah, before you go onto the event page, Ryan's
Yes.
asking if you can jump on the group element.
Sure, I'll do that, then I'll hop back to the event page. I was going to do that first. So a group element is essentially the same thing. I always have a hard time figuring out what a group element is, but as an example, I might say first of all, I might throw in a text box just saying hi, thanks for registering with us. And you could have I'm not going to type out a whole thing, but you could put your entire race notice here if you wanted to. You could then say a specific thing that if you wanted everyone in the cart to have. So usually everyone in the cart would have the same club maybe. So you could put in actually here and say club required for all registrants. And that's some good. So save, or you could say, oh, not a text field, sorry. You could ask a question that's very specific to at the group level, we could go option field. Are you a member of a relay team? And then yes. No. Yeah, if you have a good idea, Stephanie, to share. Let me see.
You need to give me the ability to share, though.
Yes, I am. Oops. I do that.
I'll just I can take a picture of it and dump it in the chat too.
Can you try now? I'm not sure if.
Oh, I can now. Yep. So let me get my.
Here, I'll stop presenting.
So this is a template for a sanctioned event that for an OCUP, for example. So for sanctioned events, we tend to do this. And most of the registrations that I've seen do this, where you're saying who's hosting it, you know, information that you might like people to see before registering that you don't want to have to repeat on every single page. So that is an example of how you can use the group element. So it's information that you want everybody to read, but you don't want to have everybody to have to go through each time they add another person. So that's the kind of thing that in Thunder Bay at LSNA that we put on these pages. And I know that ENGNE does the same thing for their races as well. So there's your example there of what you can use that for. How do I stop sharing? I like that.
Awesome. Sweet. Thanks for that, Stephanie.
No problem.
Okay. Any other questions about form elements or anything that you want me to go over? Good. Okay. Event pages. So an event page is like, you know, the host or like, yeah, I just said like the landing spot for your entire event. So kind of the idea behind it is that it's a single web page that has a single link to it, and that you can then share that link. And this one link has your registration form on it. It has any information that you want to post. It has links to your social media, to your website, and it has your results, start lists, and anything race related will all appear on this one page. So this kind of means that if you have multiple results for the same weekend, if you have multiple events going on the same weekend, or during the week, if you have a longer event, all the information can be one place, so people can just go and find, that one spot for all the information that you need. So normally, and if you want anything of the race to appear here, that's how you do it. If you have some time at the end, I'll go through and show you how to create the event page. It's very straightforward. And then, but for now, I think we'll just keep going on with the registration form. So reports. So there's a couple things in reports that are very useful in how we build and use the registration. I'm going to start at the top with this big green button right here. That's add a registrant. So sometimes you might need to add someone to the cart that isn't that either couldn't register or that you don't want them to pay the fees, or there's lots of different reasons why you might, but you can as an admin just add someone in here. You'll see all these big red things. This field is required. You can still save someone without filling any of that information in because you're an admin, but it'll be you'll be alerted to this, and so because the fields aren't filled in and it's supposed to be filled in, Zone 4 is like something's wrong is happening right here. The next thing is finding a person and finding a cart. Just to be clear, like the difference between a cart and an individual is that the cart represents the entire transaction. So if you're looking for a cart to refund someone, or because you want specifically something that had to do with that transaction, you probably look for the cart and whatever fees they paid rather than looking for an individual. Looking for an individual would then, oops, sorry, this isn't live, so there's no one to find. So searching for a person would then limit you to a specific individual who is registered with the first name, last name, and all the information that is that follows with there. Summary report. This is just going to do an overview of everyone who has registered. You'll see registrations by date, and all the fees that you collected are here, and all the totals that you'll have collected, and stuff that's been processed and stuff that we've remitted to you. All that information should appear here. There's a lot of payments, remittances, or just more information. The individual registrants button will show you a list of all the registrants and all the information that they filled out. So this is useful if you're trying to see like who's registered, how many people have registered, and what what different things. Any of these things you can click on to sort by them. So if you want to see how many people in a certain club, you can filter, or you can sort based on that, on what people put in for club. You can also download and share, so you can save a copy and then share the actual report. You can download the CSV, or you can copy a list of the emails from this page. And this incomplete registrants button, if you click on that, it'll show you parts that are missing information. So right now, because I added someone and didn't put any information in, and so right now it's listed here as a cart that is incomplete. So anything that it's missing the information, it doesn't appear anywhere, but this will tell you if for some reason you're missing some information, you can find them here. Deleted registrants. So in order to make sure that we're keeping track of people, and especially keeping track of people who may or may not have paid, if you remove someone from your registration form because you don't actually want them registered, they will end up here in the deleted carts folder. So this is helpful if you deleted the wrong person, or if you deleted them but you didn't refund them, or if you refunded them and you shouldn't have, you'll still have a record of them here in deleted carts, but they won't actually appear on the registration list. So as an example, if I add myself to this form, so then I'm not complete, so I won't appear here. But then if I decide to delete this cart, which doesn't refund people, but I can still find myself, I should still find myself here, which apparently I don't, which is interesting, but that might be just because I didn't. Well, we're in test mode, actually, that's probably why. So before your registration goes live, it's considered to be in test mode. So in test mode, you can still access everything. You can add people. You can. This wasn't working for me earlier, but under edit form, I can preview the public page. And oh, so it's working. So I can actually go in to the form now, and I can, and I can, add the first person, and I can fill in all this information.
Elijah, we're
yes.
we're only seeing your the screen, like it on your share screen. It's not taking us to the other screen that you just went to.
Interesting. Okay.
It's a Google Meets thing. So if you go back to share your screen, you'll be able to pick pick the whole thing rather
Oh,
than just
right.
the
Sorry, I see what happened.
tab.
Yeah.
The tab, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so now you can see. Okay, that looks better. So now I'm actually in the test mode, and I can, add myself and, all the information that I have, and like, just make sure that I'm actually, everything looks good. It won't let me do it because I haven't filled in mandatory fields. Anyways, so you can put in a test mode person now and see, and I think it won't actually charge you. I don't know if it'll let me continue. Anyways, shouldn't actually. Okay, that actually it will ask to this. Oops. Okay. So now I've actually registered, and now when I go back to the registration form and I go to reports and find a cart, I think I'll appear. No, maybe not. But anyways, you can then like go see, try out the form, make sure it makes sense, and find any quirks. And you can even like have someone who's not you who built it actually come through and like register for the race, and then just to make sure you didn't miss anything, or that the form makes sense, essentially, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Any questions on that? Or there's a few management tools here. Upload racers from CSV. So sometimes you might not have to worry about this, but you might be given a CSV of a whole bunch of people who want to register, but they didn't want to go through Zone 4 for whatever reason. So you can upload them so that they are in the registration file and you can keep track of them, but they won't actually go through the process of filling in the form. In this case, you'll actually have to download a template from Zone 4, which will have all the proper headers and all the everything that they need to fill in. They will then have to fill in those forms, and then you can upload it back into Zone 4. But again, something you can only do with the live registration. So, checking race licenses and data validation. So these will help you, especially if you're doing like a high-end race, like a FIS race. You want to make sure that the licenses are actually who they match, and that everything's validated properly. We have problems with this every year at the start of the season, just because it's a fair amount of work to get it going and making sure that it's working properly, and things break over the summer because we don't use it very much in the summer at all. So usually when you're doing this, you'll have to interact with us somewhat just to make sure that it's actually working. I think it's mostly working out. There might be a few problems. So if you are using these things, these fields, you might end up talking with us more, just because specifically things are always breaking, but we're working on it. So hopefully you guys won't have any problems if you are doing a high-end race. Last thing here, email newsletters. I don't know what Zone4 is doing. It's probably because it's test fund registration, but so you can use the email lists, email newsletters option to create a newsletter, which you can then send out to everyone who's registered, or Zone4 is being a bit weird. Or just create from that same screen. You should be able to pull an email list and then send it. That's how I got all your guys' emails. And the final thing on this page is saved reports. So if you want a specific report that's not, something like the confirmation list or something you want to either share publicly or just have for your own personal records, you can create your own report, and you can call it whatever you want. You can decide if it's private, where only admin can see it. If it's shared, it means that it will generate a link that you can share to people. Or if it's public, which then will actually appear on the registration form alongside the confirmation list, if you choose to make that public. You can then come through here and select any of these things that you care about or that you want to see. Whether it's you don't care about the cart number member, but you might care about name, first name, last name, date of birth, clubs, CCC licenses. And if that's all you care about, then we could, click save, and that'll create a report with just those column headers. I can then also modify the report so that and say something like, all these conditions are true. Add a condition. Sorry, CCC license is not blank. And then if I actually had people in this form, that would only show people who actually filled in the CCC license. I could then compare the total number of people here with the total number of registrants if I needed to see who didn't have a license. And whatever you might need a report for, you can create a report as long as the data is in the form. Does anyone have any questions on that? All right. Well, I think that is actually pretty much for registration forms. Does anyone have any questions or anything you want me to go over about registrations in general? Nope, you're all good. Everyone's happy with how to build a registration form. Feel confident. Awesome. All right. Well, since we have some time, I'm going to talk about event pages, which are pretty simple. But the more I can cover today, the more time I'll have on Wednesday, because Wednesday is going to be a bit more to go over. You can create an event page the same way you create a registration form, either from your home page, from your organization page, or from here. I think this button works. You can decide if you might have already created the event page, so you might want to add it to an existing event page, which will then create a drop-down menu of all the event pages that your organization has. You can create a new event page, or you don't need an event page. I'm going to create a new event page, which will then look like this. Again, you can create the event page from multiple places, just like you create the registration page, but this is like just an easy way to take it. And this event page now has the exact same name as my registration form, which is nice. Usually on an event page, I'll upload a header of whatever image I want to display for my event up here. There is under at the bottom event settings, a whole bunch of different things you can come in. You usually want to create start date and end date for your event. It's key to note within with this start and end date, any race file that you create from this event page will then default within those dates. You can say Kenmore Nordic Center. The city, the difference between the location and the city fields. Location is kind of something that's displayed, and it can be a place. It can be like I put the Nordic Center, Kenmore Nordic Center. It could be a building. It could be a town. The city, though, should be an actual location somewhere that when you type in and fill in. This actually then has to do with how some of our search works. So you can technically search on our homepage and by location. And so that's how the city would work. We also want to make sure that we have the time zone and stuff preset, because time zones get complicated sometimes in Zone4. And then any contact info you want to add here at the bottom: event, website, Facebook page, Twitter, whatever you want. You can start creating a race file directly from the event page. You can also do it again from home. We'll go over that a little more on our next session. And you can even book a timing system. I don't know if this button works. The button doesn't work. So unfortunately, that button doesn't work right now. But you should be able to, from our homepage, find out how to book a timing system through us. Last thing here, publish this event. If an event isn't public, again, it won't show in Zone4. So generally, you definitely want to publish it because otherwise people won't be able to find your results or your start list or whatever, or your registration. But again, you can leave it unpublic and just share the link. And this option here where it says share the link, this does a couple cool things. So right now, this event page is not publicly accessible. I can set it to share privately, like the registration form. This is the URL that I can then copy, and I can distribute this URL to people, so that URL will actually will be the same for your entire event. The event pages don't show unless there's something to display. So yeah, if the registration isn't open, it shouldn't. The event page shouldn't display. If you have an event page but you don't have a start list, if you don't have results, if there's nothing to show, the event pages won't show. But once there is something that you've shared, the event page should display on Zone4. The next thing is this QR code, which we've been developing. So this has been kind of useful, especially for like events that have like multiple races, and to help people during COVID. We stopped hosting results in one specific places, and we've kind of started going back to that now. But rather than having like a board with a bunch of people crowded around it, what we would do instead is produce these QR codes. And we would then post these QR codes at specific places around the event site. And then by using your phones, you can scan the QR code, and that would take you on your mobile device directly to the event page. So by clicking on this link here, it says printable PDF document. It's then downloads an image that you can then print and display. Karen, when you said how long does it stay open after the results are posted, do you need the registration or the event page? The event page will stay live on Zone4 until you turn it off, essentially. So you can, once results are posted, like if you really wanted to, you can go back to the beginning of this, not like to the legacy, but we had someone asking for the 2017 Canadian Berkey results last week for some reason. So if you search for the 2017 Canadian Berkey, you can still find those results because they are public and have not been made unpublic. So as long as you want, as long as you decide to leave them up, the results will stay there and the event page remains open. You actually have to make it private if you want it to be removed from Zone 4.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does every event have to be reviewed by you guys? Like, there seems to be a difference between public and private, but what about the review component? Do you have to review everything, or?
No, so we review the registration forms. Specifically, one of the reasons why we review registration forms and why we insist on reviewing registration forms, once a registration goes live, and specifically once people have started registering, we cannot edit the form. So sometimes we can, like, if no one's registered, we can sometimes hide elements and create new elements, but we can't remove elements once the form goes live. And so because of that, we review it because we don't want to get caught off guard where someone's like, oh, I made a registration form and then I accidentally did this. And then we have to scramble to try and figure out what they wanted and what they actually wanted and what they did. So we make sure we get that out of the way ahead of time for every single registration form. But for event pages and for race files, we don't review them. We will not review an event page. It's too basic. There's really like not, if you have a problem, you might contact us, but there's not much to go on the event page. And then for a race file, if you want us to review the race file, we will, but you again have to actually request that.
Okay, I get it. Thanks.
Settings. In an event page, the event settings kind of, especially if you have lots of races, this is kind of an option that you might have to play around with it a little bit. Group by day, group by race. This is talking about how results are displayed on the event page itself. Depending on how many times, or depending on how many races you have and how many result lists, in order to like actually make it look good, you might have to play around with by day or by race. So by race is by race file, and you might have multiple results by race file. So you don't want to do by day, because if you do it by day, then you get a whole bunch of like start list, result, or overall results, and it gets really complicated. But if you do it by race, then it's going to break it down specifically by that. On the other hand, if you have lots of different races and lots of different results, you might want to group it by day so that you see, every result set that happened on the Saturdays under one heading, and every result set that happened on the Sundays under one heading. Same thing on this page here. Same as the result page, you can edit the empty page message. You can fill that in, write a whole thing. There's nothing to display. And you can also add extra links. So for extra links, a lot of times what I'll do, or what I end up doing, is if there's any other information that I want to display, like if I had a PDF of the race notice, I could put the link to that PDF here in this extra link, and then the race notice is posted on the event page. You could also just copy the text and display that in the event page as well. So Andrew, the event page has appeared when the registration closed. I don't think you did anything wrong, but if you didn't have a public listing or anything that was displayed after the registration closed, then there was nothing to display. So Zone 4 essentially hid it because there wasn't anything to show. So in order to stop that from happening, if you post something else on the event page, or if you make something, if you had like a confirmation list that was still available for people to see, then the event page should still be visible to people. Okay. That is pretty much it for event pages, which are, really straightforward. And yeah, so you can create a race file directly from this page. That, that's a good way to start sometimes. Otherwise, we'll talk a little more on Wednesday about how to create, create race timing. Does anyone have any questions at all? Have I gone too fast over anything, or does anyone need anything else? Yep.
I have a question.
For sure.
I'm just wondering if I'm either being like, I don't know, I'm struggling here. Did Zone 4 change where, like, so if you create a new form, I'm not seeing where to pick up a shared template. I can see where I can pick up my previous templates, but how do I pick up a shared?
Right, so this depends kind of where the code path that I was talking about at the beginning, to determine where you're actually picking up the thing. So if you're creating it from an event page or from your home page, you'll only see your specific forms.
Yeah.
But if you go back to like home, like zone4.ca/manage and set up a registration form here, now at the very top, there's a link that says copy template shared by another organization.
Okay, sorry, you did go through this earlier, but
yeah.
I think it's important that people remember that, because
yeah, definitely. Because
I heard that, and I've done that 100 times, and then I just couldn't find it. I think maybe it's changed how you get at that.
Yeah, we're always tweaking things. Unfortunately, like, yeah, with a software company, sometimes things change and they don't always let you know. But yeah, so that's, again, and it's good to reiterate this because, there are, and even like I'll sometimes, depending how I do something, will get caught by something like this. If you do want to copy another organization's form, not yours, you have to do it from your zone4.ca/home or /manage or /home. If it doesn't say hello in your name at the top of the screen, you're not in the right place. But once you do, you just click on create a registration form, copy a template, and now you should see a list of every single one that's been shared publicly. Okay, so kind of, yeah, this didn't take quite as much time as I thought. If you guys are all comfortable with registrations, that was pretty much it for registrations.
Do you have any suggestions, Elijah, of what people could do before Wednesday? Like, I just shared 2 templates. People could go play with those if they want, or play with making their own.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things with Zone 4 that I know from experience, the more you do something, the easier it becomes, and the smoother it becomes, the more likely you are to remember it. So I highly encourage you to not just take what I said here and then not even think about it until next year. That wouldn't be good. But go in, create test forms, play around with it, figure out what works and what doesn't. One of the key, like the good thing about the registration form, if you're not live, you can't nothing bad's going to happen. So as long as you're in test mode, you can play around with the form as much as you want. And even if you do, somehow break that form, it's not going to be the end of the world, because you won't actually have affected anything with your organization. So I highly encourage you to play around, to copy other people's forms, to look at different examples of registrations. That's the one thing, is because I unfortunately don't deal with registrations as much as Cindy and Marion do. So I don't necessarily see some things that might be something that a lot of people use. And so because of this, there might be things that that I could tell you, like hints or tricks that I don't actually know. But if you look at those forms, you might see something and be like, oh, this club did this. That's a really great idea. I should do that. So I would definitely encourage you to look. Just to practice.
Can I ask another question too? So if we're in there practicing and we create all these forms we're never going to use, how do you delete them?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I don't know how.
Yes. So right now you can't. This has been a bit of a headache for us, just because you allowing people to delete forms was deleting things that shouldn't have been ever deleted, and causing all sorts of server lag and messing it up for everyone. So right now you cannot delete a race file or an event page or a registration form. What you can do is rename them. So a lot of times, like I have my, if I want to test something out, and especially if I'm testing a race file, I'll mark it as test. If I'm working on an event and I'm having a problem creating an event page, I was doing some testing a while ago. There was a problem with importing racers, and it wasn't working. And every time I would go to import the racers to create a race file, it wouldn't actually import them. So on my test club, I have 20 like test files, or if I encountered this in an actual like club administration, you might see race files called do not use. So one of the the key things is to come in here and where it says registration form title, call it test, call it don't use, call it, or call it template 1 or something, just so you're aware of what it is. And that's, at the moment, that's the best that we can do to avoid confusion. The good thing with race files and event pages is that as the time moves on, they'll eventually, they'll fade away into the background. But yeah, right now, nothing can be deleted.
So are you saying even if you were in test mode? Because as we were doing this session, I was playing around making something, so I can't even delete that. Like it's still in test mode, right?
Yeah. So you can delete the registration, but yeah, that registration is still a registration form. That form will be there.
Okay, I'll just change the name of it to test do not use.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's I know some people there. Well, last course I did, some people they kept getting hooked up on that, and unfortunately, that's just the way it is now. Hopefully, we'll fix that.
Elijah, before I think you gave, sorry, no, I think you switched me to the host, because I'm worried I'm going to kick everybody out.
I think you're co-host, so I think
okay.
You can leave.
I should be okay? Okay.
Okay, she's good. We're good. I think we will share it, not tonight, but eventually, Todd. Okay, so Kyle, I'm just going to start with Kyle. Yeah, so the permissions in Zone 4 sometimes are a little finicky. So it's quite possible, and I can look into this after the meeting, that, yeah, you don't quite have full permissions, and there's a bit of a, with permissions, there's a bit of a thing that even if it looks like you have full permissions, if you weren't created with full permissions, you might not have full permissions. So I can look into your specific account afterwards, Kyle.
Okay, because because I have an account because I also have kids that race and stuff like that, and also
Right.
re-register for skiing. So what I had done was I also have the Laurentian main account. So I can't remember how I did it last year, but I guess I found myself and just made myself an admin. But I guess I don't have full admin or something like that.
Yeah, it's possible. I'll have to take a look. Because when you're in your club, if you guys, when you're in your testing club, there's this big button up here that says add or remove. Sorry, my
Yeah.
testing club, and then you can add a new administrator, and just essentially put in their email address. This is always like permissions are very. We want to be
Can I add
careful
myself
with
a
that.
second time?
If you have another email, you can add yourself a second time, or you can remove
Okay.
Well, you probably can't remove yourself. You can get someone to remove you.
Well, I had two. Well, I had the main.
If you have two,
account, so-
if you have two accounts, then you can remove one of them and then add yourself back.
Okay, so revoke myself and then add myself as an administrator.
Yes.
Okay, I'll try that.
So the archive button, it doesn't really do anything. It marks the file as an archived file. From the user perspective, it doesn't seem to actually change anything at the moment. So that was a way that we were looking at to get around this. We can't delete it, but we don't want to show it. So the idea is that you click archive and then it hides it, and you can only see it if you specifically look for archive races. But I think at the moment, the archive button doesn't actually work, or it doesn't fully do its job. It marks it as archived, but it doesn't actually change anything on the user end side.
Oh, there we go. It worked, by the way. I revoked myself and re-added myself, and it's working.
Perfect.
Thanks.
And of course. Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to go over? I'm a little hesitant. I don't want to jump into race files tonight because I don't really want to. We don't have quite enough time to get through it, and I don't want to confuse anyone or get go over something tonight and then not go over it on Wednesday. But if you have any questions now, I think this is a good time for you guys to ask them. Passes where is this?
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking is we do a little bit we do our memberships on here, and we're very rural, and just wondering about possibility of using those as instead of mailing out or picking up a pass, having something they can print off. So I wasn't really going to bring that up if it was all race timing, but looks like you might have a little bit of time to address that.
Yeah. Depending, what you want. That's the idea behind it, is that you can when someone goes on your form and they register, you can then create a parking pass or a membership card that then allows them that they can then carry with them and display. I think it's pretty straightforward in that you're required to have a first name, last name, and email address added to the form. So I'm just gonna, I don't know what it's gonna do if I don't have email, so I'm gonna try and add email again.
So that's just a one-time per membership, per season thing, right? There's nothing that you could do for multiple opportunities in a season. Is that correct?
Yeah, as far as I know, there's well, I'm trying to think, because there's probably different ways that you could go about doing it, but because I think some people set up forms that essentially are people come in and they buy like a single day pass membership. So you could set up a form that, like, you know, if you had for trail fees, that in order to buy a trail pass, you know, you use a Zone4 form. And every time they you know, they can come, they can just, you know, essentially register again. But that would be, yeah, kind of the only way that I can think of off the top of my head to do it. Otherwise, the only other way would be to create, like, you know, a registration form like on a weekly basis.
Okay, no, that addresses it. Yeah, it's kind of what I did during COVID. So I was just wondering if I was going about it right or not. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Kind of like it was something that we kind of created during COVID for that reason, and we haven't had a lot of time to expand on it. But any other things you'd like me to go over? All right then. Well, I guess that's probably it for tonight then. I think we covered everything on my list. And yeah, I'll be in touch. I'll send out probably tomorrow. I'll send out another email for Wednesday night. And yeah, hope you guys have a great night. Thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you then.